that was a false event to start with, but is continuing to be a false event, and it's happening again. So years ago, Ariel Sharon, the then Prime Minister of Israel, visited the Temple Mount, the Har HaBayit, the site of the former Jewish temple. And his visit was used as a catalyst to start a new intifada against a new uprising, a popular uprising with the fake Palestinians against the Israeli people. It wasn't true. His visit had nothing to do with the uprising or the violence that followed his visit. But his visit was what Arafat claimed caused the riot. It was later proved that the riot was the riot. It was more than a riot. The uprising, the continuous violence over the course of the next couple of years, was pre-planned by the Palestinian Authority, and they were just looking for a reason to do it. They were just looking for a catalyst to start violence, and that always seems to be the way that the Palestinian Authority works. Oh, we want peace. They tell the world, we want peace with Israel. We want to be able to live in peace and harmony with the Jewish state. We want to be able to have our people. All our people do want to do is they want to raise enough money. They want to make enough money so that they could go and support their families. That's all they want to do. And so we will continue negotiating with the Israelis. And this is what they tell the world. But what they tell their people, when they talk to their people, what they tell their people is something totally different. So they say one thing in English and they say something totally different in Arabic when they talk Arabic to their people. And what they tell their people is this is the first step in the annihilation of Israel. This is this is an outrage. They're trying to take over the Temple Mount. This is all we heard after Ariel Sharon, the late former Prime Minister of the State of Israel, decided to visit the Temple Mount. And this is what we're hearing today. This is again happening again today, and it's scary. It's scary to a certain extent that the world is again falling for this horrible trope, falling for this terrible, terrible, terrible lie that somehow the status quo, somehow the Jews are going to rip down the Alaska Mosque and the Dome of the Rock and take over the Temple Mount and throw everybody out and build a new temple on the Temple Mount. Now it seems kind of ridiculous that people are afraid that the Jews are going to build a temple on the Temple Mount. It seems kind of ridiculous that people would be afraid of that. Why would you be afraid that the Jews would build a temple on the Temple Mount? It's called the Temple Mount for a reason. It's not called the Temple Mount for fun. It's not called the Temple Mount because there was no temple there. It's called the Temple Mount for a reason. And so it confuses me when people like President Joe Biden claim that the Jews want to take over land that's not theirs. And they oppose. Here, this is a statement from the U.S. government today, in response to an Israeli official visiting the Temple Mount. This is the response. The U.S. government, the Joe Biden administration, released the following statement: the United States stands firmly for the preservation of the historic status quo with respect to the holy sites in Jerusalem. We oppose any unilateral actions that undercut the historical status quo. They are unacceptable. So this was the official line of the Joe Biden administration. This was released by U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price, and he underscored that the Biden administration expected Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his government to preserve the status quo. We took note of the fact that Netanyahu's governing platform calls for the preservation of the historic status quo with relation to the holy places. We expect him to follow through with that commitment in word and in practice, and this is what we'll be watching for, Price said. Price said U.S. officials had spoken Tuesday to their Israeli counterparts in the new government, including the Prime Minister's office, and that the substance was similar to what he relayed to the reporters. So let me get this straight. I'm just trying to understand. Well, even before that, let's just take a look at what Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State of the United States, said today. He said that that he underscored the need to preserve that historic status quo at the Al-Haram al-Sharif, the Temple Mount, he said, will be quite clear in opposing any unilateral steps that set back the prospect of a two-state solution farther back, Price said, adding that this also includes de-escalating tensions and avoiding steps that exacerbate violence. In New York, Jordan and Palestinian authorities pushed for a UN Security Council meeting on the matter. Of course they did. Okay, so this is all a result of a Jewish diplomat, an Israeli politician's visit to the Temple Mount. This is all a result of that. So a Jew goes to the Temple Mount, an Israeli politician in the state of Israel goes to the Temple Mount, and he gets condemned for doing that, and the whole world goes crazy that maybe the Jews will take back their Temple Mount. Maybe the Jews will take back the land that is theirs. Maybe the Jews will try to reclaim what's rightfully theirs. How insane is that? It's completely insane. It's totally off the rockers. The most infuriating part of this whole thing is they keep talking about status quo and that they're not going to tolerate anything that is going to violate the status quo. We must keep the status quo. This is all they keep saying. At the end of the day, the status quo is violated continuously by the Arabs living in Israel and around Israel. Status quo is violated when Arabs attack Jews and kill Jews. The status quo is violated when Arab countries call for the murder of Jews. The status quo is violated when people in Gaza celebrate the death of Jewish soldiers and the death of Jewish civilians that were killed in terrorist attacks, and they give out candy. There's no condemnations from Blinken then. No condemnations from Biden then. Only a condemnation when Itamar Ben-Gvir goes to the Temple Mount and visits the Temple Mount. Only a condemnation then. It's almost as if it's pre-planned, as it was before. Pre-planned. A pre-planned opposition, and then a pre-planned attack on the Jewish nation, which will not be condemned by the United Nations or the United States or anybody else, where more Jews will die. Then everyone will be happy. Because the world loves dead Jews. The world loves dead Jews. So everybody's going to be thrilled if there's another intifada, another popular uprising spurred by the Palestinian Authority, and people die, especially Jews. The world will rejoice that Jews are dying. And the UN will condemn the Jewish state another 150,000 times. And then what will happen? The government of Bibi Netanyahu will back down again and abandon the Jewish state and give off more land and trade more terrorists and do whatever they can to gain the trust and the admiration of the world. Because that's what we need as a Jewish state, the trust and admiration of the world. Not peace and security. Not removing our enemies from the land. Not destroying the threat, but the admiration and the love of Joe Biden and his administration in the United States. It is absolutely mind-blowing that the Jewish community around the world, who, by the way, have admitted right now that their support of the Jewish state is kind of waning. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But it's mind-blowing that the Jewish state, that the Jewish people, the Jewish population of the world, hasn't risen up in anger, hasn't started screaming, hasn't started yelling. That this blood libel is starting again. That we're going back to the situation that happened with the Second Intifada. That they're making up lies to justify the murder of Jews. This is unacceptable. This is disgusting. We must stand against it. Any rational, normal human being must stand against it. Must call out this fallacy. Must tell the truth. Because the truth is really what matters here. And the more we hide the truth, the more we allow them to write our history, the more we allow the losers to write our history, the less power we hold in our own country. Scary if you think about it. Extremely scary if you think about it. I don't know why there isn't more outrage. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman. We are live on a Wednesday morning. You could give me a call in North America, 301-768-4841. In Israel, 0265000151. Check out the webpage, israelnewstalkradio.com, where the numbers are there. I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to join me in the conversation. Number to call in North America, 301-768-4841. In Israel, 0265000151. We're live on a Wednesday morning, and you could feel free to call in. I'd love to. It's actually evening. It's actually midnight in America, but it's morning in Israel, and I'd love for you to call in. Once again, if you missed those numbers, you can get them at the top of the page at israelnewstalkradio.com. That's israelnewstalkradio.com, the best website on the web, israelnewstalkradio.com. All right, so we watching this blood libel happen again. We're watching the blood libel happen again. An Israeli politician goes up to the Temple Mount. The Arabs freak out. Say the Israelis are trying to take over the Temple Mount, to rip down the Dome of the Rock, to rip down the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and then to build their temple there. And the world is buying it, eating it like yesterday's supper. They're eating it. They're eating it up, because the world loves to see dead Jews. And you know who else loves to see dead Jews and suffering Jews in Israel? It's Jews in North America. Apparently. I guess that's their new pastime. At one time, North America was the undying supporter of the state of Israel. They stood behind Israel no matter what, rain or shine, sickness or health. They were standing behind Israel. That is not the case anymore, unfortunately. Unfortunately, we have run into a case of American wokeism. That's the term I'm going to use, because I think it's an appropriate term for what's going on with the Jewish community in the United States. We know that we've talked about this a lot, that that Jewish life in the United States is coming to an end. That we know, no question about it. Anti-Jewism in the United States has risen to unprecedented levels, and the Jewish community in the United States is in serious trouble. So we know this, and this is what we know. And you figure that the Jewish community in the United States, knowing that they're in such trouble, that the federations and the United Jewish Appeals and the B'nai Bris and all the other Jewish organizations that are paid to be outraged, all the outrage organizations, you figure that they would somehow try to make nice with the newly elected government of the State of Israel. But that's not what's happening. What's happening now is that the organizations in the United States, the major Jewish organizations that run the Jewish communities in all the United States of America, are condemning the Israeli government, something that they said that you're not allowed to do in the diaspora. Years ago, I put on a I held a couple of rallies in front of the Israeli consulate in the city I was living in North America, and opposing the Oslo Accords. We held rallies opposing the Oslo Accords, supporting the state of Israel, supporting the government, but opposing the Oslo Accords. And we were condemned by every Jewish organization out there. Everybody said, you can't protest the state of Israel outside the state of Israel. It's a bad omen. It's a bad sign. People will look at it and say the Jews don't support Israel. You can't do it. You can't do it. You can't do it. This is what I was told. And at one point, some pulpit rabbis cornered me in a room one day and said to me, Howie, whatever you're doing, you have to stop. It's totally outrageous that a Jew would be standing in front of the Israeli consulate and would be protesting against the state of Israel. You don't have kids in the army there. You're not in the army there. You don't have kids in the army there. You have no right to protest. This is what they told me. And I guess to a certain extent, they were right to a certain extent. Although the state of Israel is the heritage of all the Jewish people, and we all have a stake in it, so we should all have a say in its future, and we should all be there to support it and to try to push it forward in the way that it should be running. But they might have had a little point there, that by protesting in the diaspora about the state of Israel, Jews protesting the state of Israel would send the wrong message to non-Jews and would encourage Jew haters to do the same thing. So they might have had a little point there, but at the end of the day, they were condemning me, publicly condemning me for protesting the Oslo Accords. Fast forward 30 years, and now they're the ones who are protesting the state of Israel. United Jewish Federations have come out and said that the right-wing, extremist right-wing government of Bibi Netanyahu is not going to be good for the state of Israel, and in fact will probably lead to the destruction of the state of Israel. B'nai B'rith International came out with a statement saying that we cannot fathom supporting an extremist right-wing group that is forming the coalition for the state of Israel. Wow. What harsh words from diaspora Jews who will be relying on the state of Israel in the near future to save them from the tragedy that's going to happen in North America. What strong words, what harsh words from people who condemned and continue to condemn people who protest the policies of the state of Israel. I guess what's good for the goose is not necessarily good for the gander. I guess it's do what I say, don't do what I do. I'm not quite sure how this factors in. I'm not quite sure how this works. I'm not allowed to protest in the state of Israel in public because it might give the wrong sign and you don't represent the Jewish community and all the other reasons they gave me 30 years ago. And now they can? What has changed? A coalition they don't like? They have political difference with the government and therefore you abandon the state? You throw the baby away with the bathwater? Is that what happens? It's infuriating. And so you wonder now if and when, I'm not even going to say if, when the violence starts in Israel, when the third or fourth or fifth or sixth intifada starts, popular uprising starts because the Palestinian Authority and the leadership of the Palestinian Authority threatens their people that if they don't start attacking Jews, then their families will be killed or their money will be taken away. When that happens, who's going to stand up for Israel? Who's going to scream and yell? Who's going to insist that the American government stop the Palestinian Authority? Even though they'll probably support them at this point. Who's going to do that? It's not going to be the North American Jews. They're already condemning the Israeli government. They're going to hope, the North American Jewish community groups are going to hope, against all hopes, that the Intifada will knock this government out of power. That's what they're going to hope. That's going to be their prayers. They're going to pray that this coalition is going to fall apart if Jews start getting attacked in Israel. And then a left-wing coalition could come in, and then all the lefty Jews in the United States will be very happy. Because, we'll have pluralism and diversity, and nobody will be talking about actually making the Jewish state Jewish. So they'll be extremely happy. They'll be thrilled. It's amazing. It's amazing that the organized Jewish community of North America, the diaspora Jewish community, is upset because Israel is heading towards a position of becoming more Jewish. And that's upsetting them. Of course it is. Naturally. I can't imagine it's not upsetting them. Think about it. 80% of the North American Jewish community is assimilated. 80% of them, a good percentage of those 80%, know nothing about Judaism at all. It scares them. Like, what is Judaism? They have no clue. Anybody who's part of the Reform movement has no idea what Judaism is. Or at least what traditional Judaism is, what the Torah says Judaism is. They have no idea. And even if they do know, they don't want to see that. They don't want to see authentic Judaism in Israel. They don't want to see Judaism being practiced in the Jewish land publicly. Sure, the crazies on the mountains could do whatever they want. But in Tel Aviv? Who wants to see Jewishness in Tel Aviv? Come on. What's wrong with you? And so, of course, they're not going to stand against this. They're not going to yell. They're not going to scream. They're not going to even protest. They'll find reasons not to. There's always reasons not to do something. And that's really sad. It's really sad that politics gets in the way of everything. And that people can't get past the woke politics. They can't get past themselves. They can't get over themselves and realize that their point of view is not the end-all and is-all of everything. That there are other people out there who have a point of view, and sometimes other people are right and you're wrong. Sometimes, just sometimes, you got to accept the fact that other people have other opinions. Sometimes you got to step back and say, there's more to the world than me. But unfortunately, we're dealing with a me generation, a generation that was raised as narcissists, a generation that was raised to think that they could do no wrong, that everything that the world revolves around them, everything revolves around them. They never lost a sporting event. Everybody got participation prizes. They never lost anything. They don't know what losing something is. They don't know what fighting for something is. Everything was handed to them on a silver platter. So, an existential crisis in Israel, a crisis of murdering Jews, of an uprising where more Jews are going to die over an exaggerated lie. That doesn't concern them. They don't live in Israel. What do they care? And that's the sad reality we're living in today. And so, if a popular uprising happens, Israel's going to lose on the propaganda battle in North America. What a shame. I'm Howie Silvergard. This is Political Hitman. We'll be right back. I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to join in the conversation. All you got to do is pick up your phone and give us a call. 301-768-4841 in North America, 02-650-0151 in Israel. And, of course, you get those numbers on the top of the page at israelnewstalkradio.com. And I'd love to talk to you, so give me a call. Pinchas Goldschmidt is the former chief rabbi of Moscow. He fled the country earlier this year and has just come out and said that other Russian Jews should leave before it's too late. He made this statement in The Guardian. Now, this is the quote. "When we look back over Russian history, whenever the political system was in danger, you saw the government trying to redirect the anger and discontent of the masses towards the Jewish community. We saw this in the Tsarist times and at the end of the Stalinist regime. He argued that Russia's floundering invasion of Ukraine is starting to foster a similar environment. We're seeing the rise of anti-Semitism, he said. While Russia is going back to a new kind of Soviet Union and step by step the Iron Curtain is coming down again. This is why I believe the best option for Russian Jews is to leave and leave now," Goldschmidt said. Now, I agree with him. It's time for Jews to leave Russia. It's time for Jews to leave North America. It's time for Jews to leave everywhere and go to Israel. We're starting to see the walls close in on the diaspora. That's really what's happening. We're starting to see the walls close in on the diaspora, and we're starting to see the ingathering of Jewish life everywhere, back into Israel. It's time for people to leave Europe, to Jews to leave Europe. It's time for Jews to leave North America. It's time for Jews to leave Russia. So there's not much other places in the world that Jews could go and live. I mean, maybe in Africa, but it was time for Jews to leave Africa 20 years ago. So I don't understand. I'm really not quite sure why these Jewish organizations that now hate the government of the State of Israel and that are now advocating for the destruction of the government of the State of Israel, I'm not so sure why these Jewish organizations that have vowed to protect the Jewish communities of North America haven't been trying to convince the Jews of North America to actually move to Israel. It seems counterproductive to their mission of saving Jews to encourage Jews to stay in situations that are dangerous. It seems counterproductive to their mission of protecting the Jewish communities when Jews are being beaten up in the streets of North America and the streets of Europe. It seems counterproductive of these organizations. It seems totally counterproductive and totally against their mission when Jews could apply for Aliyah and just make Aliyah, just move to Israel. It just seems counterproductive to me. I don't get it. And I don't understand why these organizations haven't started a mass movement to get Jews out of danger zones. For the last at least 3-4 years, we've been talking on this show about Jews being openly attacked in New York City. Now, New York City has the largest contingent of Jews, the largest population of Jews outside of Israel anywhere in the world. And we've been talking about New York City Jews being beaten in the streets of New York. We've seen the governor of New York get up and blame the Jews for the spread of COVID. We've seen the mayor of New York get up and blame the Jews for the spread of COVID. We've watched and we've listened to New Yorkers, famous New Yorkers like Al Sharpton, who's gotten up and started the Crown Heights riots, which ended up with the death of a young yeshiva boy. We saw guys like Jesse Jackson, big revered people in the United States, getting up and calling New York Town and saying the Jews control the world. We see Kanye West running around and praising Hitler. We see basketball players saying bad things and horrific things and passing blood libels against the Jewish people. Actors, talk show hosts. I mean, the list is almost never ending in the last little while. The list has been never ending of popular people, of people who are media darlings, people who are the darlings of everything, getting up and screaming that the Jewish people are controlling the world, the Jewish people are evil, the Jewish people are controlling the banks, the Jewish people control entertainment. All these blood libels that have been used against the Jewish people for centuries, these blood libels that have resulted in the murder of millions of Jews. And we've been silent. We've been watching, and our Jewish organizations have been silent. Oh, we have to re-educate them. No, we don't have to re-educate them. No, no. There's no re-educating a person who hates you. And until we realize this, until we understand that our enemies are our enemies and they're not going to change, we're not going to be able to educate them to not be our enemies. I remember years ago, there was a firebombing of a Jewish day school. A young Arab boy walked into a the schoolyard of a Jewish day school in North America on Erev Pesach, so the eve of Pesach, the eve of Passover. He walked into a schoolyard and he threw a Molotov cocktail through the window of the library. Of course, the Molotov cocktail blew up. The library was full of books. There was a huge fire, and the young Arab was caught. And they put him up on trial. They charged him. They were going to charge him with a hate crime, but they weren't sure if his crime constituted a hate crime. Then they were going to charge him with terrorism, and they weren't sure if his crime constituted terrorism, if it fit the terrorism bill, which it did, by the way. It fit the hate crime bill and the terrorism bill. So they ended up charging the guy with arson. And of course, he got the slap on the wrist, and he went back into the field, and he tried to light another bomb somewhere else in the city. So they arrested him again. And then they went to the Jewish community, because his second target was also a Jewish target, and they said to that Jewish community, well, what should we do? And the Jewish community said to them, we have to re-educate him. So we'll bring him to the Holocaust Museum, and then he'll have to sit through a couple of seminars, and then we'll teach him about we'll expose him to Judaism, the Jewish people, and then he'll realize that we're not really bad people, so he shouldn't be targeting us, and therefore everything should be okay after that. And that was their solution. The man tried to bomb the Jewish community twice, and the response of the Jewish community was, let's re-educate him. Let's expose him to a Holocaust museum. Let's teach him about the trials and tribulation. Let's show him about the weak Jews and the dead Jews, and we'll show him bodies of Jews being pushed into graves. And that's somehow going to convince him that the Jewish people are great people and they should be loved, and he shouldn't be trying to blow them up. This is the solution that's always being forwarded. Re-education. There's no re-educating a hater. There's no re-educating somebody who's praising Hitler. I mean, even if he's doing it out of ignorance, there's no re-educating him. You're not going to convince somebody who's diabolically against your ideology that somehow your ideology is correct and his ideology is wrong. You're not going to convince a 50-odd-year-old man that years and years and years of his thinking and his rationality and his ideas are all wrong because they're insulting or they're offending someone. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about the Jews. And so because nobody cares about the Jews, anybody can say anything they want and nobody really cares. Of course, you had a few Jewish celebrities who got up and said, well, that's not acceptable, Kanye. You can't say stuff like that. And Jewish pressure, ironically, Jewish pressure, stripped Kanye of some of his money and some of his contracts, which indirectly actually proved his point for him that Jews control his purse strings. So Jews going and having him canceled actually proved his point. So it's kind of a catch-22 there. So what do you do with Jew haters? How do you counter Jew hatred? How do you counter people who don't like the government of the State of Israel, so they're standing against the State of Israel? How do you do this? What do you do as a Jewish activist, as an activist, as a person who cares about the Jewish community, to counter these kind of nutcases? The kind of nutcases who say we have to re-educate a guy who bombed the community twice. The kind of nutcases that say, you know what? Let's spend hundreds of millions of dollars putting in security measures into our buildings in North America because we never know when someone's coming to attack us. Instead of putting hundreds of millions of dollars into campaigns to convince or into aid to help people move to Israel. How do you convince these people that what they're doing is wrong? That they're approaching this in the entirely wrong way? That they have to turn around, they have to wake up, they have to open their eyes and see. that if for 3 years Jews have been attacked in New York City, it's not going to stop tomorrow. No matter how much re-education they want to do, no matter how much they want to they want to save the situation, you're not going to save the situation. And when the government of New York starts scapegoating the Jewish community and starts telling, I mean, like, I saw the press conference where former Governor Cuomo showed a picture of Hasidic Jews praying at a synagogue during COVID and said the words, these guys are the ones who are spreading COVID in New York City. They're part of the problem. He didn't point out to any of the other communities. Sure, there were no Muslims that went to the mosque during COVID. And of course, no Christians stuck into churches during COVID. It was only the Jews praying in synagogues. And of course, it was only the Jewish community, right, that got COVID, that got sick. Nobody else did. I mean, do you know of anybody else who got sick? Give me a break. Of course, it wasn't only the Jewish community. Of course, other people snuck into their places of worship. Of course, other people violated the COVID regulations, as ridiculous as they were. Of course he did. But the governor of New York only pointed out to Jews. And that wasn't enough to convince the Jewish community in New York that time has come to go. It's fascinating. It's fascinating because when we look at this guy Goldschmidt in Russia, who said, "Hey, wait a second. You know, once the government turns on the communities, once the government realizes that they're in a pickle and they need a scapegoat for whatever reason, it's always the Jews. So let's get out of here before the government decides it's us again." It takes a guy in Russia to come up with a statement, not a guy in North America. Quite scary. And they're not even beating up Russians in the middle of the street yet. They will, but they're not there yet. But they are beating up Jews in the middle of the street in New York. And in Chicago. And in Canada. It's mind-blowing, really. I'm telling you, my mind is always blown when I think about this stuff. And when I analyze this stuff, and when I prepare for the shows, and I analyze the stuff, and I take a look at all the data, and I take a look at all the material, my mind is always blown. I'm always just shocked, and it's just, I don't even have the words to express the disbelief that overtakes me when I realize how much abandonment there is to the Jewish communities in the world by the organized Jewish communities, by the major organizations. And I know you say, Howie, you have a beef against them, so you bash them all the time. But it's not true. That's not true at all. So a lot of people like to deflect reality. They like to deflect the truth. So when someone gets up and speaks the truth, people like to deflect the fact that they're speaking the truth. So I have no beef against anybody or any organization. Honestly, no beef at all. I only have a beef against people who are standing against the Jewish state and against the Jewish people. People who aren't doing their jobs to help the Jewish people survive. That I have a beef against. People who are not going to stand up and fight and argue and protest when Jews are going to be killed in Israel in a repeat performance because an Israeli politician decided to visit Har HaBayit, the Temple Mount. It's a repeat performance. We saw this movie before. This TV show played before. This is a rerun. And those who don't learn from history are bound to repeat it, and we are proving that point extremely well. George Santayana said that right after the Holocaust, and we're proving the point extremely well. We just have to look at history. It's the exact same situation. And it's building up the exact same way it built up then. Now, we could stop it now. It could be stopped immediately. It could be stopped immediately, but we choose not to stop it. And how could it be stopped? It's actually really simple. It's really, really simple. The Israeli government could stop it immediately by warning the Palestinian Authority that if any Jew gets killed, then the Israeli government is going to have to take action to ensure the safety of every Jew in Israel. if any Jew gets injured, if any Jew gets molested in any way, then the Israeli government's going to have to take action, regardless of what the world says, regardless of what the UN says, regardless of any condemnations that would come their way. They would take care of the situation immediately. That's really the solution. That's how you end. That's the end game. That's how you end the story. Now, no Israeli government has had the guts to do that and tell America, forget it, America. We don't care. Our job is to protect our citizenship, so I don't care what you have to say. They're building up towards another uprising. They're broadcasting lies, accusing the Israeli government of things that they're not doing. So I really don't care what America has to say, and this is what the Israeli government should do. Years ago, an Israeli government official told me personally, before I was physically removed from the building, that Israel's GDP was high enough that they didn't have to take money from the Americas. That Israel makes enough money, and there's enough money in Israel, that they don't have to rely on anybody. They can rely on themselves. Well, if Yossi Beilin was correct, then there should be no problem with the Israeli government telling the Americans, you want to take your money away? Go ahead, take your money away. You want to take your power away? Take your power away. You want to take away your vote in the UN? Take it away. We don't care. Israel shouldn't even be part of the UN. We should have withdrawn from the UN a long time ago. But you need a government that has the guts to do that. You need a government that has the ambition and the drive to stand up for the Jewish people, to stand up for the Israeli people, to stand up for the country. And I know. I've said it for a couple of times already. I don't believe that Benjamin Netanyahu is the prime minister that's going to do that. I really don't believe that. And I don't believe that bringing Netanyahu back for his 25th term, or whatever it is, for his 27th year in office, is really productive for the state of Israel, is really good for the state of Israel. It's not. And those of us pretending that it's a good thing, it's just pretend. It's just make-believe. This is not a good move for the state of Israel. And the reason it's not a good move, there's twofold. There's two reasons why it's not a good move. Number one, we already know that Benjamin Netanyahu bows to the pressure of the United States and bows to external pressure, and backs down from doing what must be done in order to protect and save lives in Israel. We know that happens because we've seen it happen time and 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 time again. We've seen it happen. And the second reason that it's a bad idea is when a prime minister is in office for too long, as Netanyahu is, what happens is they become complacent. They become too comfortable in the position. And when you're too comfortable in the position, you become apathetic. And apathy leads to major problems everywhere. Anytime there's an apathetic situation, anytime somebody's apathetic about something, they're not putting their full heart and soul into it. And if you're not putting your full heart and soul into it, you're not doing the job that has to be done. And put apathy with affluence, and you got a very weak country. And that's where we're at. We have an apathetic prime minister who is very affluent, and an affluent country also. So the drive to protect the country, the fear that the country could be overrun at any time, the country could be destroyed at any time, has disappeared. A strong army and a large GDP, a large amount of money that's generated in Israel, has killed that hunger. Without the hunger, without the drive, unfortunately, more Jews are going to have to die. It's sad. I hate saying stuff like this, but it's the truth. If this continues the way it's going, and this visit to the Temple Mount the reaction to the visit to the Temple Mount continues on the same trajectory it is right now, then we're back in the situation right after Ariel Sharon visited the Temple Mount, where the lies will build, and the lies will build, and the lies will build, and the Palestinian Authority will convince other people, people under them, that they have to attack Israel. and they have to attack Israelis, and they have to protect the Temple Mount, they have to protect the Alaska Mosque, and they have to protect the Dome of the Rock. And then Hamas will come out and say that it is a imperative of every Muslim person to kill a Jew. And then we'll start seeing terror attacks happening in Israel again. Well, bigger terror attacks and more frequent terror attacks. Nobody really wants to see that, and I hate predicting these things. But I'm hoping that next week, when I come back next week here on Political Hitman, I won't be crying on the air that there was a big terrorist attack and many Jews have died. I'm really hoping that doesn't happen. I'm really hoping that the Israeli Prime Minister and the cabinet of Israel take the appropriate actions to stop this horrific thing that's happening right now. This horrific buildup to violence. I'm really hoping that the American government takes a look at the situation and realizes that it's not Israel that's provoking here. There was no provocation at all. In fact, all the violence that's being provoked now is being provoked by the Palestinian Authority and their allies. Their partners like Hamas. These are the people who are promoting violence. And that the violence will start on their side against Jews, not on the Jewish side against them. I'm really hope and pray that this doesn't happen. And I think we should all pray and we should all pressure the Prime Minister of Israel to take a decisive stand and to stand against this kind of escalation and end this before it even starts. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you again next week.